Madam President, in July this year, I gave a speech in the chamber about the tragic death of 15-year-old Eden Westbrook in St Helens, Tasmania, on the 18th of February 2015. The police who conducted a deeply flawed investigation in the days following Eden's death stated that Eden had taken her own life, and the coroner also found that Eden's death was suicide. Eden's mum and dad, Jason and Amanda Westbrook, don't believe Eden ended her life, and neither do I. Amanda and Jason have fought for nearly 10 years to get the truth, despite gaslighting, intimidation, and harassment. Eden was a bright, bubbly, and very loved young woman, and immediately before her death, she was looking forward to a weekend away with two of her sisters and was planning to buy her first car. Not only was the investigation into Eden's death deeply flawed, the disgraced late Senior Sergeant Paul Reynolds was the coroner's associate in this case. Reynolds' paedophilia activity over 3 decades in Tasmania as a senior police officer was exposed to some extent by the recent Wise review. Just a few weeks ago, in a bombshell ruling, a Tasmanian coroner's ruling into the 2000 death of Helen Bird by hanging at her home in the suburb of Hobart was overturned. The same police forensics officer on Bird's case was also the forensics officer on Eden's case. Helen's family and friends have been fighting for years to get the truth of her supposed suicide, and now 14 years later, the coroner has found that Helen Bird's husband was involved and staged her death to make it look like suicide. I have recently put in a number of right to information applications in an effort to get answers for the Westbrook family. In one application's response, many of the pages were completely redacted, exemptions were applied, and it was not considered in the public interest to release the information sought about Eden's death. The argument for a public inquest into Eden's death and an inquest by an external coroner and counsel assisting is compelling, and the evidence for this just keeps stacking up. First, the Tasmanian coroner and chief magistrate are still refusing to provide Eden's autopsy photos to the independent expert forensic pathologist, authorised by the Westbrooks for an analysis. Just the fact that they won't hand them over is suspicious in itself, especially given the evidence from Hunter and Justin Westbrook, Eden's sisters. Eden's sisters saw Eden's body immediately before she was cremated. Both say that Eden had evidence to bruising to her face and that either Eden's teeth were shattered. Inquiries by Bridgewater police some months after Eden's death, with a key witness, Kim Woodbrook, who according to police was the first to discover Eden's body, suggests that Eden may have had marks on her wrists, that her hands may have been tied behind her back. There is also involvement of Reynolds as the coroner's associate, who in Coroner McTaggart's own words provided regular oversight and direction to the investigation. The Wise review in 2024 into Senior Sergeant Paul Reynolds failed to deal specifically with Eden Westbrook's matter in the written report, despite detailed oral and written submissions from the Westbrooks and their former lawyer. The matter clearly fell within the terms of reference. That is shameful in itself. Absolutely shameful. The very recent decision of Coroner Webster in the Helen Bird case raises critical questions. The same coroner on Eden's case found that Helen also died of asphyxia due to hanging and that her death was suicide. There is no evidence of an inadequate investigation in forensics and involvement and staging of a suicide by Helen Bird's husband. The same forensics officer who failed to take any measurements of the rope or the ladder or samples from the rope for DNA testing or fingerprints in Helen's case was the same forensics officer who briefly examined Eden's death scene. Shocking. The Tasmanian Police Forensic Services is the only police forensic service in Australia not accredited by the National Association of Testing Authorities. And why is the crime scene examiner not independent from police? The Bird case was largely exposed due to the diligence of Tasmanian Police Officer Detective Senior Constable Nikki Munro, and I congratulate her. Sadly, there are no public police champions in Eden's case. The police investigation immediately following Eden's death failed to interview critical witnesses and failed to undertake a professional investigation and failed again later, even though the name of the person of interest and possible suspect were part of the formal referral from the Commission of Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse in Institutions and the government response in early 2023. The more you know about the details of this case, the more dodgy it looks. There is stench everywhere and it just won't go away. In the days following Eden's death, the police didn't even ask to look at Eden's mobile phone, and they didn't examine her social media accounts. There was also an apparent failure to analyse all 000 calls, 1314, and Crime Stoppers calls around the time, and there is disturbing evidence of harassment, intimidation by police of the Westfield family. One Right to Information disclosure recently confirmed that Constable Smithhurst did in fact view the relevant CCTV footage of the skate park, and there had been a misunderstanding in relation to information Smithhurst had provided to the Westbrooks within days of Eden's death. There are numerous statements taken by the Westbrooks' former lawyer, including statements from witnesses covering critical issues from the evening of the 17th of February 2015. Possible pedophilia activity in the St Helens area around the time of Eden's death, and the movements and actions of key witnesses. It's very clear to me that the police made up their minds that Eden's death was suicide on day one, without first conclusively establishing that there was nothing suspicious. This is clearly illustrated by the material obtained under the RTI. Police also failed to use intelligence data to determine whether there were similar incidents or grooming, harassment in St Helens around the time of Eden's death. I said in my speech in July this year that I considered there had been a cover-up in this case, and I can assure you I'm not backing down. I don't give a stuff what the Police Commissioner says. I'm also concerned about the competence, effectiveness and integrity and the partiality of some within the Tasmanian Police. I question why forensic science in Tasmania is not independent from police, and why Tasmanian Police is the only police agency in Australia to not have its police forensic services, for example, the crime scene examination, the photography, the fingerprints, the ballistics, etc., accredited by NATA, the National Association of Testing Authorities. Tasmanians deserve better. My goodness, no wonder the Liberal Party's in trouble down there. The deficiencies in Eden's case are simply mind-blowing. It is time to hold an independent inquiry to ensure that this does not happen again to any other family. An inquest by external coroner and counsel assisting with proper legal support for the Westbrooks should be urgently established. Helen Bird's death proved that the system can get things terribly wrong. I once again call upon the Tasmanian government, particularly the Attorney-General, to make immediate steps to rectify this national disgrace. I say this to the Attorney-General. I say this to you in Tasmania. You can go and change laws to release those autopsy photos, and I'll tell you what, my patience is running out with you, and I'm sick of your excuses. As a matter of fact, you're sitting in 2 weeks of Parliament, and you can't go in and change those laws to put this family out of their misery. You seriously are staying up. You seriously are. I want those goddamn autopsy photos. And if there's nothing to hide, then release them. This is putting a real stain on the state of Tasmania. And it's putting a stain on the Tasmanian Police. Was it a proper investigation done or not? It is a simple question, and we can't decide that until you release those autopsy photos. But there is states to the high heaven over what happened to Eden Westbrook at 15 years of age. And I'll tell you what, if she was my daughter, I would want to know. I want to know the truth